So, whiskey. You know you like it. I know I like it. But what actually is it? Is it just brown alcohol? I mean, why does Scotch taste different than Irish whiskey? Why does Irish whiskey taste different than Japanese? What is it? So, let's have a little look about what it actually is in plain English, without all the confusing sort of jargon that we can hear out there. So, at the end of the video, you should know what whiskey is, how it's made, and why every bottle has its own personality. So let's pour yourself a dram, get comfortable, and let's see what whiskey is. It's fantastic, that's what it is. Easy, done, end the video, right? No, not really. At its simplest, whiskey is really a spirit distilled from grain aged in wooden barrels. You know, that's it. Every whiskey in the world starts its life with just three simple, very, very basic, simple things. It starts with water, grain, and yeast. And a little bit of time in the end to mature the whiskey. There is, of course, a little bit more to it than that, but they are the basic ingredients of whiskey, and that's pretty much it. They don't sound very exciting, but when you combine them with time and oak barrels, a little bit of patience, and a little bit of know-how, you get something pretty special, don't you? The four basic steps, really. I mean, making whiskey, it sounds incredibly difficult, but it's really not. It's four steps. Okay, so you got the malting and mashing, which is the grain is prepared, and dependent on the style of the whiskey, whether it might be barley, which a lot of single malt whiskies are. It might be corn. A lot of bourbons are corn. Rye gives it a little bit of spice, and a wheat whiskey gives it more of a body feel, more of a mouthfeel, creamy type of whiskey. Very, very nice. So the grain is mixed with hot water, and that releases natural sugars, creating a sweet sort of cereal, biscuity type of substance, if you like. It's called wort, W-O-R-T, wort. And think of it it's just like a sugary cereal tea. Ugh. All right, not very nice at that stage. Fermentation. All right, so now there's a lot more to it than this, but these are the basics, guys. Next, yeast is added into the wort, into that mixture, if you like. And what happens is the yeast starts to consume the sugar content from the grain, and that produces alcohol. So over a few days, you've basically got, I suppose, what you call a very, very rough basic beer. It's pretty awful to drink at that stage, but there is alcohol in it. And then we move on to distillation. And that's really, some of the magic starts to happen at this point. Not all of it, but some of it. The liquid is heated inside a still, and alcohol boils before water boils. So you can think of the separation as boiling, and if you can control the temperatures, you know exactly what you're taking off before the water comes. All right, that's how you get the whiskey. That's how you separate the alcohol from the water. And depending on the country and style, whiskey could be distilled 2 times, as most Scottish distilleries are, or 3 times, as most Irish distilleries still practicing. So all new whiskey, it doesn't come out coloured like this. It comes out coloured more like vodka, water. It's plain, clear, crystal clear. So next you get on to maturation. And this is sort of more, to me, this is really where the magic happens. The clear spirit goes into the barrel, into an oak cask for a certain amount of years. And it gains all of its colour, all of its flavour, much of its flavour, and I can say, and a huge amount of its character, depending on that particular cask. So why does whiskey taste so different? Well, it's a question that a lot of people ask. However, you got to say, well, why one bottle would taste different than another bottle? It's whiskey, it's made the same rough way. And the answer is there's a lot of small decisions that have to be made along the way to get that final flavor in whiskey. You can consider the type of grain that you're going to use and what proportions of grain, so you can mix grains, etc. The shape of the stills, so bulbous, tall, taller the still, the more refined the spirit will come off at the top. How long is the whiskey going to be matured? It has to be a legal whiskey, so it has to be matured for its 2 or 3 years in Scotland, I'm not sure, but that makes it legal. But a lot of whiskies we're looking at are 10, 12 years old, 15 years old, 20 years old. But there are also whiskies that say no age statement, and that means they are legal, but they're pretty young whiskies. A whiskey matured, say, in an ex-bourbon barrel often will give you some sort of vanilla, honey, caramel notes. And a whiskey matured in maybe an Oloroso PX sherry cask, that might give you some richer, drier, Christmas cakey type, fruits, that type of thing. It's a little bit like cooking, I suppose. You give 5 chefs the same ingredients, and you're going to get 5 different dishes. You can bet your bottom dollar on that. Scottish, Irish, bourbon, Japanese. What's the difference really? They're completely different styles of whiskey, usually in completely different casks. But they're all whiskey, aren't they? They simply follow. As in the cooking analogy, they simply follow different recipes, I guess. Scotch has to be made in Scotland and is usually from malted barley. It's a bit like the champagne has to be made in the Champagne region, so Scotch has to be made in Scotland. Irish whiskies made in Ireland and often distilled 3 times, as we mentioned earlier, giving it that sort of lighter in body, smoother style of whiskey. Bourbon comes from the United States. And it must contain at least 51% of corn grains, giving it that sweeter caramel and vanilla flavours. But they're all members of the same family. They just have slightly different personalities. Now, do the older whiskies mean that they are automatically better? It's actually quite a myth, because a 25-year-old whiskey, they say, must always be better than a 10-year-old whiskey, and that is not necessarily true. Not in every case. In some cases it is, but not in every case. It doesn't tell you, the age in the barrel doesn't tell you how good the whiskey is. It just tells you how long it's been in there. But the most important thing really is whiskey is about, really, it's an embodiment of spirit. I mean, we have so many different styles, so many different flavors, thousands of whiskies, in fact tens of thousands to try, but every year there are hundreds and thousands to hundreds, I don't know, new expressions of whiskey going on to the market. And the more your palate develops, the more you crave to try something different. I've been drinking whiskey well over a decade, probably longer, and you're still looking for that perfect whiskey. I'm not sure I've had that perfect whiskey yet, because I always live in hope of, when I go to my tasting group, for example, that I'm going to get something which is just going to blow my head off, and I'll give it a 10 and I'll rave, for forever about that particular whiskey until I get something even better. So listen, I hope that's given you a bit of an explanation of what whiskey actually is. It's the grain, water, the yeast, transformed by fermentation, distilled, and then years inside a wooden cask. So pretty simple, really. If you found this video interesting, please subscribe, as it really does help the channel along. And until next time, guys, sláinte.